This library project in an old Tudor house near York was many months in the planning. It's finally all completed, and I thought you might be interested to see how we made it, the design decisions we made and why, and some of the technical details of it. The materials we used are solid oak, oak veneered MDF, and a little bit of birch plywood for inside the radiator cabinet. I'll go into a bit more detail about why we chose the materials and where we used them when I talk about the construction. All the component parts were pre-finished in the workshop. The first step was a water-based stain. This is a walnut stain. And then when that was dry, we put on a microporous hard wax oil, which adds durability. And then on top of that, to denib and add sheen and also a bit of depth of colour, we finished with a superior finishing wax. It's an antique wax that is also quite dark brown and adds a little bit of depth of colour. The doors are made from 27mm finished thickness solid oak with a mason's mitre and a beaded detail there, with a 9mm thick oak veneered MDF panel. So that's the doors. You've also then got oak veneered MDF, which is just a more appropriate material for wide panels like this big back panel here, and also the worktops, which are solid oak lipped, but the main board is oak veneered MDF, which will stay flatter and more stable than if it was a solid oak board. Another good place for using the MDF was the radiator panel, which if we'd used solid oak would be very prone to warping and gaps opening up because it's near a heat source. So the oak veneered MDF is really a better choice. And then just inside here, the carcass, which you can hardly see, is birch plywood. Because it was a wide backless unit, I felt the birch plywood would be more rigid than the oak veneered MDF. So less sort of floppy until the whole thing's assembled together, which then holds everything rigid. Now, many traditionalists would say we should have used butt joints on a project like this, sorry, butt hinges I meant to say. But we opted for soft close hinges because we just feel that the action on them, the way they work, is really nice for any modern furniture. So you don't get any visible hinge knuckle, but you have this kitchen style hinge, and this is a Blum black onyx. I don't know if the lighting's good enough to see that, but it's a black onyx hinge. It's an inset hinge, so it has a sort of crank on it. Let's see if you can see this one better. We use these quite a lot. It's a cranked inset hinge, and it's on an inline mounting plate, which is quite discreet. And it is called a thick door profile hinge. As I said before, the doors are 27mm thick, which I felt was about as thick as I wanted to go to ensure there were no issues with that type of hinge. Now, otherwise, in terms of hardware, we've got a printer pull-out here, which has, again, it may be too dark, unfortunately, but we've got Blum Movento runners under there, and they're a special variation which is made for fixing to a lower surface. So that's fixed in such a way that it doesn't interfere with the hinges, and I've even put some little rubber wheels on there that don't scratch the doors. And then finally, on hardware, the grill is an antiqued brass grill from Gower Grills down south. I've always found them very helpful. This is handmade, I believe, and really matches the style very well, similarly to these knobs, these antique brass knobs. Clearly a radiator cover needs to be removable for access. The way that we went about this was we fitted some clips before we assembled the whole unit. We fitted them from the other side so that we could place this in position and then just fix the clips where they needed to go. And we've used a mixture of the plinth lock style plastic fixings you can get from Toolstation and Screwfix for kitchen fitting, which are friction fit, so we didn't want too much grab. And then we just added some, just for a sureness of fix, we've added these little bronzed metal clips, which I think came originally from Hayfully, but we're just knocking about the workshop and were perfect for the purpose. We've also, just to help locate it and not put too much weight on the little black plastic clips, we've used these modesty blocks, which really helps it to fit snugly into position. So there's a nice positive click to that, and it stays just where it should stay with the gaps nice and even. Another little feature is, I don't know if you can see these cable outlets. Solid wood, solid oak, which we've stained to match the rest. The lighting we've used on this project is the brand that we always use. It's called Luke's, made by Hayfully, who are a furniture fittings supplier. We find it's very reliable, good quality, good range. We generally use the warm white. It's called the LED 2043 strip. It's 4.8 watts per linear metre. It has this warm light. And the special thing we've done on this project is to use the remote control receivers and controller. So you can turn the whole thing off and on with your power button. You can dim it by holding that, and it just goes through a dimming cycle either down or up. And then you can individually control the lights, and this is down to how we've wired it, which I'll show you in a minute. So you can turn each row on and off, and then you can also dim them individually. Once you've created a setting that you like, if for some reason you wanted one shelf on and others off, you can save that by just holding the setting button for 5 seconds, I think it is. And there we go, there's a little flash that shows it's recorded. So now you can flick between settings without having to dim each one individually. So that's got them all on. That was preset with just one, and that's the setting that I've just set up. Creating this lighting was one of the more time-consuming aspects of this project, because the LED strips had to be integrated. I hate seeing the little pinpoints of LED strip light. For me, it always has to be concealed. And we did that here, perhaps if I just turn it off, by concealing it behind a lip. But we had to pre-finish the boards with a wax finish that the self-adhesive strips wouldn't stick to. So after finishing, we routed, with a specially made router setup, we routed a little recessed groove in that back edge so that the strip would stick. We opted not to put them in any sort of aluminium channeling or anything, because we just didn't want anything non-traditional looking to be slightly visible. We wanted them to stay discreet. The other challenging thing was all of these side panels had to be pierced. Let's see if I can dim that so it's visible, but there's a hole through there, so the light strip carries on through as one continuous strip for all these long runs, a strip per shelf run, and then a short strip per shelf run there. And we decided to get those side panels CNC cut to get those very clean holes where the lighting had to run through. So finally, what did we charge for this project? Well, I'll keep you in suspense a little bit, I'm afraid. We're quite a small firm. This was a big scale project for us, and it's one of those where once I sat down and priced it all up, I was a little bit shocked at the price. It came to 15 grand in the end, including the lighting, and that was up from my original estimate to the customer of about 12 grand. That first 12 grand estimate was based on a previous oak project I'd done, where I'd priced it at about 7 grand and discovered later that he'd had 3 other quotes all around 10 grand. So for this project, when the inquiry came in, I took a rule of thumb per linear metre based on 10 grand for that past project, which put this size of project at about 12 grand. Once we went through all the detailed design process with extras added on and the cost of the lighting and all that sort of stuff, it went up to the 15 grand. I've just spoken to the customer, and to put it in perspective, she had one quote at 5 grand, which sounds shockingly low, but and that is by a very quality fitter who I know in York, but he was taking a very different approach with more veneered MDF. I don't know what sort of lighting he was using. I must say he probably would have regretted that price. I've done that before. I think that would have been too low for this project. At the other end of the spectrum, the customer had a guide price from Neville Johnson, which was 25 grand. So when ours arrived at 15 grand, she felt that she could see the justification, and having had it made. She feels that the quality is really there and she's quite happy with that price. So this sort of work, it's not cheap, but from my point of view, the month that we were producing this was actually a less profitable month than all the standard work, which is white painted fitted alcoves. You know, we might be doing a few of those at about £2 each, but the profit actually was higher on them, and that's something I found before. This very involved bespoke work is just so time consuming and risky that it's not necessarily as profitable as you might think. I hope that's all been interesting. I'd be interested to hear any comments or questions you've got, either from a customer perspective or other makers, and happy to share any more about this or discuss this sort of work with you. Thanks for watching. I'm Alistair Johnson at Freebird Interiors in Sheffield.